Hello, I'm Fox, and I am not a game designer. Today's video, we are working on Heroes of Cavis. This is the video where I am kind of working through my first proposal for version 3. Right? Let's throw up real quick the things that I'm trying to accomplish. I want to have cards. I want it on a board. I want strategy and tactics. I want armies versus teams. Obviously, there will be mirror matches, but that's not the point. And I want cool stuff. But we're not working on the cool stuff today. This is the boring stuff. But it is kind of fun. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was first proposal, redesign, version 2. Now, regardless of how clearly you remember how version 2 is, I'm sending this video to a friend if anybody just on the internet happens to catch this video. If you have any questions about anything specific to how things work, either post in the comments I could try to answer, or maybe in the future I could actually maybe try to teach people how to play version 2, because a lot of the stuff will work on version 2. But we will try to get a little bit into the gritty here, just for a refresher. The way Cavis works, broadly speaking, is that you draw cards from your deck, right? You add them to your hand, right? And then if you have a unit that has a cost 2, you have to discard two cards at the graveyard. Dong. Which we just call the discard pile the whole time. And then this unit goes on the board, right? And then this unit moves around and fights. That is the core system. But in order to move around, you needed to have a farm on the field and active, right? So every unit had a farm. And it was kind of, and like I said in the previous video, there are a lot of little fun things about this system. One fun thing is I like the fact that the countryside was littered with all these farms, right? So it felt like this little country. I actually really liked the discard system. The cool thing that we never really got into was you could discard things you didn't need, and then what would happen is, and this is the part I guess I hadn't really talked about, is that when you run out of cards in your deck, you don't lose the game like you do in most games. You actually just shuffle your discard pile back in. So you end up with this cycle, right? The way the card game works is you draw cards, and then you deploy cards, buildings and units. Like, I'm only talking about the units, but buildings were also things that you had to deploy. You then had to, and then the things you deployed were units, right? And those units required farms, right? So you also deployed buildings, but in this case, we're going to talk about farms, right? And that's what you needed for the units. This is kind of this way the system worked. My first proposal, well, so I suppose we gotta try to talk about what did and didn't work. And I don't know if I'm gonna do a great job of this, but obviously we have cards. But it was actually kind of an X, because it was never really a trading card game. It was never really able to be collectible. But it maybe could have been if I felt confident enough to just push forward and make cards. But it has cards, so I'm going to say yes. It has a board, that's great. It has strategy, but it did not have tactics. We never really got to the point. units cost so much, and they would kind of die. So you'd end up just kind of running out of cards and just constantly needing to just churn units onto the board and churn units on the board. And because you had this extra step of needing the farms for all of your units, there wasn't really a lot of room even in the deck to just have things, to have little micro advantages. And I never really developed the units with like complicated abilities, so there really were no taxes in the game. And as far as the A versus T, this is like the big one. It was a huge fail because the farms ended up, because every farm or every unit needed a farm. If you ended up with an extra unit, he couldn't do anything, right? You needed to just place a farm. What this ended up doing is feeling less like mana, like Magic the Gathering mana, or like an action point system, and more like a population cap. And on the one hand, that's cool. On the other hand, that's not what I'm looking to do. One thing I could have done is had maybe like farms do more than one unit, but I was just kind of getting lost because I just found that in the cool stuff, because we did not make enough cool stuff either. Like if I wanted to make like a bird or a skeleton unit, I'm like, the farms make sense when I'm only making soldiers and I'm feeling like I'm running a city. But if I wanted to have an army of just nothing but skeleton lords, right? Or like maybe a guy has like a giant phoenix bird, or like foxes are my thing. Like how in the world am I ever going to make a fox unit out of this? I can make a fox themed person, but I felt a little limited in the cool stuff realm. That's kind of a review on version 2. Here is what I want to do in version 3. The thing that was annoying me the most are these farms, and I want to eliminate the farms. One thing that I was always a little scared of doing something like unlimiting everything, because I felt it would create really swingy games where you would move all your units and kill all your opponent's units, and then he would move all his units and kill all your units, and it would just be really back and forth and swingy. The thing is, the game took so long to play. Not like super crazy, but definitely not trading card game length. Like we're talking like maybe an hour to play an entire game. Like it probably needs the swinginess just to like function as a game, as an enjoyable experience. The other thing is that the other thing to bring up is in version 1, which I don't talk about much because I didn't play it necessarily all that much, was that version 1 didn't have an action point system, and so every unit you'd play, right, could use as much action points. But if your opponent just had more units than you just had more things you could do, and you would just kill your opponent. And that's a problem because of the fourth point here, right? So here's what I want, right? I want to draw cards. I want to draw lots of cards. I want my opponent to feel like he has options. I want him to be able to get the cards out. I want to put on units, and then I want those units to be able to get boosted. Boost cards, right? This is essentially the core of my new proposal, and then it technically loops because they go in the discard pile and they loop back. The way that this would work would be just at a core level. I'm going to dig into this pretty in depth, maybe even in a separate video. But the way so there's a couple things going on here. For one thing, strategy versus tactics. The strategy part would still be in the deploying buildings that draw you cards and like figuring out the positioning of your units and deciding where to send them. But we're attempting to add in a bunch of tactics, right? Either by having, like, if you have an army, right? You're the skeleton army and you have all these things. Maybe you have a tactics card that says if you have 3 units together, they do extra damage, right? Something really simple. Or, and this is the big one, is that if you, right, are the army and you're under attack by just like one dude, maybe he has fireball spell or chain lightning or something, and he damages all your units at once, and that is like the factor. One thing I really wanted to bring up is that I see this, and it's not. The more I think about it, the more I'm not able to actually implement it as a rock paper scissors system, but it has existed as a rock paper scissors system in movies and video games for forever, and absolutely needs to be here, and it was never here, and I really want to implement it. Is right. You have an army of lots of units, right, and they get defeated by like the area of effect attack, right? Like we're talking like maybe like a catapult, right? That throws it, right? That throws the fireball and it kills everybody. But the way you beat the catapult is you just get like one dude who just has more hit points and who just kills it really fast. But the way you kill that dude is just by swarming him with a bunch of dudes, because this guy only does like single target damage. I see it all the time, right? This isn't really a true rock paper scissors system because there's really only two different kinds of units here, and then there's like an effect, and this effect really is kind of just utilized by both sides, and it's not really like a true triangle, especially since you might end up with elements of both things anyways, right? Even like MOBAs have a duo lane, so you might end up with like individual heroes, but then like a couple units working well together on the other side. I guess this video ended up just being a talking about version 2, and I think I'm going to make a third video that is diving in deeper into this idea, right? We're going to go kind of deep on what the requirements are and the way I think it's going to work, and the fact that I think it can provide a lot of interesting things. Once again, if you stumble across this video and have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll figure it out.